Hi, mining community. Welcome back to another episode of the Dig Deep the Mining podcast. And today's guest is Mike Hodgson, who's the CEO of Serabi Gold, an exploration and production company involved in the evaluation and development of gold deposits in Brazil. Mike is a geologist by background and has worked across Europe and South America, working for the likes of ACA Howe International, Rio Tinto, and Zambia Consolidated copper mines. So his expertise is in narrow vein underground mining operations. So he's here to talk about Serabi Gold, mining in Brazil, and much more. So that's welcome, Mike, to the podcast. How you doing, Mike?
Very well, thank you, Rob. Thank you for the invitation.
Yeah, no worries, and I appreciate your time. So, yeah, as we always start these podcasts, wondered if you can tell the audience or give our audience an overview of your background. Obviously as a geologist, what you've done in your career, and bring us up to sort of present date from when you graduated.
Wow. Well, I've been doing this for about 35 years now, and I suppose I'm very fortunate that I've actually stayed employed right the way through that time. I lived through some, the mining industry and the metal cycles are well, they're cyclic. So there are boom periods and bust periods, and so to stay and not give up on the industry and keep going right the way through. I'm pretty pleased to actually have managed to have done that, and it's quite an achievement. As you say, I graduated back in the early 80s. I did a mining master's degree at Leicester University back in 83, 84. And I started life with RTZ very quickly, as many a Brit did, cut my teeth in mining in Zambia on the big copper mines, which was basically a great grounding for understanding everything about the industry. Did about 4 years out there, stayed in Africa a little bit longer, did some uranium exploration stroke development program. And then I actually sort of came back to the UK and got a job in Cornwall at South Crofty back in the late 80s. And that was probably where I sort of started specializing a lot in smaller underground mining. And that's kind of become my niche. It wasn't by choice. I did that. Great grounding, great place to work, great dedicated team of people. And I stayed there a long time. And since then, it's taken me to, and probably at that point, I transitioned a little bit from being a mine geologist into more underground on operational management, and moved into sort of more managerial roles, operational management roles, up into sort of mine superintendent's position, etc. And then I spent a bit of time working for TVX Gold, which is a very sort of fast-moving, emerging junior stroke mid-tier company on the TSX in the late 90s, which took me all over South America. But ultimately, I ran the base metal operation for TVX Gold in Greece. So I was working in Greece, and again, that was a small quality, relatively small underground mine, where again, with most underground small mines, it's all about quality rather than quantity, dilution control, and good mining practice, etc., to maintain those margins. So again, that was my specialization. And then after that, that company got sold, and I ended up finding myself back in South America, working for Orvana Minerals, and again, underground mining in Bolivia, but I was based in Toronto. And then ultimately that job moved, I took the position with Serabi back in 2008, initially on the board, and then became the CEO a little while afterwards. And I've been there ever since. And hey ho, it's high grade underground mining again. And this time it's gold. So the commodity has changed. Tin initially, and then I've done copper, uranium, tin, then gold or base metals with gold. And then basically since around 2005, I've probably focused only on gold. But each time it's been small underground mining, which is quite a challenge, because the industry has really been dominated by vast open pit targets over the last sort of 30 odd years. This obsession with scale and driving down unit costs, which has generally been what's driven the market. And so we're at the other end of the spectrum. We're sort of mining quality ounces, small volumes, etc., which sometimes investors struggle to understand because they don't see that story very often. But what's really good about it is the capex is always low when you're building something new, and it's small footprints. And in these times of a lot ESG and environmental concerns, and small footprints and power issues. Small is good. Small is beautiful, and it certainly worked for us. So I find myself, we're back where I started: small underground mining, chasing quality ounces, and I like it.
Yeah. Do you think that swing will change from having more small underground mines, rather than having that vast open pit operations?
Well, it works in our part of the world, certainly. Brazil in the north, where we are, Brazil is it's essentially a continent. It's a federation of 26 states. People, including myself, when I first went to work there, generally oversimplify what Brazil is. They think it's one big country and it's all the same. Far from it. In the south, you've got pretty sophisticated, developed country, almost first world in some states. But in the north, where we are, we're definitely in third world, developing. Brazil, very limited power. The power distribution is improving a lot, and it's growing, but it's still a constraint on the state where we are. Road access is improving, but again, it has been a problem. So so where you've got small power, you've got power challenges, and you've actually got a big sort of concern, and rightly so, about environmental standards. I think the days, and certainly where we are, of developing enormous surface mines, which are going to require huge amounts of power, huge amounts of capital from investors, which will be at risk because they're trying to get something permitted in an environmentally sensitive area, and you're deforesting a lot of ground there. And we all know what a hot potato deforestation is in the Amazon today. We are focusing on small, high-grade mines projects, which we know we can get permitted, we know we can get built, and we know we can actually operate responsibly and viably.
Okay. I wonder if you can give us an overview of Serabi Gold. Obviously, you're a gold miner in Brazil. Just wondering if you can give us an overview of the company. You said you've been there since 2008, so probably that progression would be good to hear, to where you are sort of today.
Yeah, well, when I joined the company didn't really have any much sort of mining expertise. It was populated with, although I graduated as a geologist, I transitioned into sort of operational management and engineering a long time ago. But the company was kind of populated with a lot of exploration geologists, and they put a small mine into production, which was no mean feat, because it was in a very remote place at that time. Where Palito is today is a very different world to where it was in 2006, when it was really remote. The access was terrible. There was no power. So those first sort of pioneers in Serabi did some, really did the hard yards and did some great things. But the company was kind of their desire, their love was exploration, and so the mine was never really established in a correct way. It was and it was Australian juniors, and I always find with the Aussies, a lot of the Aussies, I love their approach. It's kind of see a speck of gold and start mining. And so it was all done on a bit of a shoestring and sort of pretty risky approach. But in that time, in the mid 2000s, there was a lot of money around, and it was quite easy to get finance. And it was the time when the AIM junior bubble was really growing, and investors came in, and Serabi sort of got a real tailwind with investors, etc. And I think the problem then, there's a lot of funds got into these juniors, not just Serabi, but many juniors, big funds, JP Morgan and JD Framlington's, Standard Bank, trying to remember all the names, some pretty big names back then, and they were all, the junior world was a real departure from their safe jurisdictions normally. And I think the expectations from these big funds and banks and whatever on these small juniors was pretty high. And I think at the time the board of Serabi and the major shareholders were quite happy with that sort of expectation running away. And I think then, of course, the strategy of the company, rather than doing the right thing technically, was more driven by the expectation in the market. We've got Serabi was going into production in 2006 on a small high-grade mine. it could never do more than about 30,000 ounces. But if the market wanted to think it was 60, going to 80, going to 100, then let it. And that was kind of the culture back then. And the share price was going through the roof, and everyone was happy. And in parallel, it was the time when Yamana were really taken off on the TSX in Brazil as well. So there was kind of, well, is Serabi going to be the next Yamana type thing? And I suppose the company never really had the people in place to understand how could we scale up, and we didn't have the people on the ground in Brazil to really run the operation to do that expansion. And it's a desperate attempt to kind of chase scale. The mining method was changed, and the whole thing just went wrong. I was brought in really to try to, at the last moment, say, look, what this is all going wrong. What can we do? Being a mining guy. And I said, well, it's too late. And I almost came in and closed. Basically, I closed the mine down. It was the first thing I did. And we then decided that we had to, and I suppose being new, I could do that where the existing sort of management couldn't. So I did that. And then I oversaw then basically about a 4-year period where we got Eldorado in as a new shareholder. They had bought a kind of the flagship asset in the region. And I think they'd seen us stop mining this small little mine, and they wanted us to focus on sort of regional exploration, try and really grow the resource and not revisit any kind of production question until we had a resource big enough to deliver a meaningful level of production, which all made a lot of sense. So that's what we did. And we spent about 3 or 4 years doing that. We took the company from 400 odd people down to say 25. We really streamlined the company, and we essentially became an exploration development company. We listed on the TSX on the back of the Eldorado placing, and things were going pretty well. And then we kind of hit a point in around 2012, 2013, when we'd listed on the TSX. But the markets, again, there was just so little market for exploration and development stories back then. It was just all about production, whether it was big or small or whatever. And although we didn't want to go back into production, we really had no choice. It was the only funding options open to us were some of our existing shareholders saying, well, we'll back a restart of gold production, but we won't put any more money into exploration. So somewhat reluctantly, we did a PEA and we put the mine back into production. But it was a godsend because we timed it really well. The gold price had gone to about $1,700 an ounce, and we put Palito back into production as a small underground mine. But this time we did it right, and we brought in a Peruvian mining contractor and these guys know underground mining very, very well. We didn't. One of the big problems in Brazil is there's so little, as I'd explained right at the very beginning. Brazil is a classic case of what we see in the world today. It's just dominated by enormous, huge mines. So small underground mines are very hard to find. It's very hard to find the people who work in them, and it's very hard to find the equipment that you need to operate them. There is just a complete lack of it in Brazil. Well, there is in the world, but particularly in Brazil. So we brought in a Peruvian contractor, which we've since nationalized, but they've actually been the salvation of this selective high-grade mining that we do. So that's really been our success. Now, slowly we've trained up more and more Brazilians, and we mechanized the mine more, so our reliance on these guys has actually diminished, which is good. And we've just ramped up over the last sort of 5 years. We put the mine back into production. Then we switched the plant on a year later. We rebuilt the plant. In 2014, we went into production. We picked up a satellite asset called Sao Chico on the way. And so we've since ramped up to about 40,000 ounces. So it's made money. But of course, we are still stuck in that. It's just not meaningful enough, 40,000 ounces. So how do we get bigger? How do we get bigger? Well, we still believe in what we do. You can't just simply mine that deposit faster to get the production up, but you need another one like it. And so that's where Coringa came along. So Coringa was an asset down the road from our mine, Palito. It was in the hands of Anfield, which became Equinox, which is one of Ross Beattie's companies. They did a lot of work there, spent a lot of money on it, and it kind of really doesn't work for anybody else but us. I mean, if you put that asset into Serabi, it's another Palito, so it's simply another 40,000 ounces. So we then become, as we're now doing it, we're developing it, we become an 80,000 ounce producer. And I think with a little bit of exploration success in and around both sites, we can get to 100,000 ounces. And finally, we are beginning to get that critical mass and that scale that gets a bit of market awareness. So that's our big push now to. And the nice thing is, we're not leaving our comfort zone. We are just doing what we've done before with Coringa. We're building another Palito, and we've done it once. And the capex is $25–30 million, which is a refreshingly small number compared to most builds that you see these days. And it's going to be meaningful for us. Very, very, it's going to change our world. We're going to go to 40 to 80, 90,000 ounces in the next 2 years. So
it looks from reading recent announcements and corporate moves that Serabi's looking to grow materially in the near future. Can you walk us through the Coringa acquisition and plans for development and exploration?
Yeah, I mean, we are spending. I mean, last year being the pandemic year, we just basically had to go into sort of a little bit of hibernation. We had to cut the workforce back, and it's just a year of production from Palito. We really had to park our exploration. We were going to do a very aggressive exploration plan around Palito because there's a lot of upside in around Palito. It's a plant constrained business. We know the plant needs to expand, and a satellite mine called Sao Chico. They both have amazing exploration upside. Just to simply expand the Palito plant blind would be silly. We're trying to explore in and around that area to see maybe we should put some kind of small plant at Sao Chico instead of expanding the Palito plant. Either way, we need more plant capacity at Palito. And the exploration effort is really and therefore there is much we should do. So we've had to postpone that for a year, but this year we're doing 30,000 meters of drilling in and around Palito. We've got 4 rigs there today drilling away, and we'll keep that going all of this year and probably a big part of next year. So we're really throwing some dollars at the Palito complex to actually push for organic growth and understand, where we should best expand our plant and by how much. Coringa is down the road from Palito. It's a little too far away to actually have sort of production, any kind of like operational synergy in terms of feeding with plant synergy, for example. It's got obviously managerial and synergy, etc. But that's got its own plant. It's what we're doing at Coringa is we bought it in 2018 from Anfield. We paid $22 million in cash. That's all paid for. We paid for it out of a little bit of equity raise, but basically out of cash flow. So cash flow from Palito has basically bought half Coringa. We're now busily getting it ready to start the mine. We've got the permit to start the underground mine at Coringa now. So we plan to finally start our first blast in July. I'll be getting down there. Very exciting time. I see that mine begin, and that'll be great. So we're going to spend the next sort of 9–12 months developing the mine hard. That's the issue with an underground mine. It takes a time. You've got to develop quite a lot of the underground mine before you start getting it set up ready to have a sustainable level of production. So like Palito, there'll be a 2-year ramp up to get the mine started, which means we do not have to start the process plant building it tomorrow. We're still working, and we actually don't have the permit to start the permit or to assemble the process plant yet. The permit plant is there. But it needs, but we're working through the last permit, what's called the installation license. That's to allow us to assemble that plant and ultimately switch it on. But again, that's not a long lead item, so we don't need to do that yet. But we hope to get that permit by the end of this year, so we can actually start the site clearance and the construction of the process plant. But because the beauty about Coringa is we have the plant there already, we're not going out looking for it to buy it or procure it. We've already got the plant there. It's a second-hand plant, but so really the capex is it's civils, it's concrete, it's foundations, it's the plumbing in, the power, the electricity, and all that stuff. So the big part of our capex, that $25 million, is mine development. It's just basically getting underground initially with 1 heading, and then 1 heading can branch out into 2 headings, 2 become 4, 4 become 8. And we just go chasing veins underground all over the place. So that's all going to be that's what we're going to be doing over the next sort of 18 months. So it's underground development is the big push, and starting in July. So that's the plan.
Yeah. What's it like operating in Brazil? Obviously, you mentioned there is a number of different challenges that you have faced, obviously with a variety of different equipment, people, etc. Obviously, you've been through that now, and obviously looking at the new developments. What is there any other challenges, or what challenges do you see that you're going to face over the next 18 months, 2 years, for instance?
Well, people, it has a reputation of, bureaucracy and labor laws being difficult and corruption. And obviously the president today is constantly being criticized for, his lack of, respect for the, in the indigenous communities and etc. Yes, but I don't think mining is easy in any jurisdiction these days. It really isn't, and I would say, we got Palito and Sao Chico up and running again within about permitting within months, and at Coringa we've got a mining license within months. We had a public hearing during the pandemic last year. We actually got a public hearing, which the local people had unanimous support for us to get the mine up and running. The government are always looking for, companies to be there and bring jobs. They're particularly in the north of Brazil. I think it's a good. Okay, you've got the problem that you've got. Power is limited in certain places. Infrastructure is limited, and you probably haven't got a very educated workforce. So it's not so easy on that front. But that said, socially, they're always looking for companies to come in, and Brazil has this problem that the people in the north are generally always migrating to the south, to the urban areas, and they really want to encourage business or companies to go there and set up businesses. One thing I learned in Brazil, working there, is, I think I said before, it's a federation of 26 states that speak Portuguese and use the Brazilian real currency, but that's about the end of the what's in common. The state government, we're in the state of Pará in the north of Brazil, and they literally, that state government is far more powerful than the federal government. It really is, and therefore you are, they love to see you not just being a Brazilian company, but you've got to be in our case, a Pará company in that state and really commit. And so we spend, we employ virtually 85% of our workforce are local. All of our money that all our purchases we do in the state of Pará, and we try to really recycle the money. And I think that's been enormously helpful for us. We're not some little Canadian junior that's just arrived and, we've drilled a few holes at Coringa and we're just pumping the market to make money. We've been at Palito for 15 years and stuck it through. We're the only hard rock producer in the region. And although we're not a big company, in that part of Brazil, we're a big fish in a small pond. And we've kind of proven that we are committed to the region, and we've done everything right. We brought modern, responsible mining to an area which is dominated by garimpeiros. They are the artisanal miners, the domestic miners, which generally give mining a bad name, because they go there and they sort of cut down trees and scar the landscape and then just sort of scarper out of town. We are a flagship to the local authorities and the environmental agencies because, although we're small, we are, doing it mine into production and bring, duplicate the amount of jobs we've already got. So, it was pretty easy to get the mine permitted and move forward. So that's been really important to us, our image that we are committed to the region, and therefore, so yes, it's there are the challenges which are basically infrastructural, power and access and all of those things, and finding the skills to do the job, because as I say, in mining in Brazil, the mining schools are all in the south, so we are somewhat reliant on bringing Brazilians from the south of Brazil to the north of Brazil, which is not ideal because, funnily enough, those people that come from the south of Brazil, they speak Portuguese, are just as much a gringo in Brazil as you and I would be. because they're not local. It's no different from, we find in this country, if we suddenly, I don't know, decide to go and live in the Scottish Highlands in a small island, it would take a while to get accepted, wouldn't it? So it is a bit like that. But it is, I think we've got a formula for doing this, and it's worked for us. So we're it's I wouldn't say it's easy, but I think starting mines. I don't think anywhere in the world now starting up a mine is easy, and I think where we are, it's as easy. It's probably as easy as it gets. That's what I would say.
Yeah. How have the sort of recent tailings issues in Brazil impacted mining companies, obviously operating in the country, and obviously in relation to yourself as well in Serabi?
Well, that has been a challenge. There's no hiding that fact, and it's I get quite frustrated that one of the world's biggest companies, BHP and Vale, have done all this damage. They both of these mines were theirs, and or Vale's anyway, and the two big disasters that occurred. We are very different to that. First of all, those are big iron ore mines, and their tailings dams are huge because their operations are huge. They are enormous, and I think probably back in sort of 20 odd years ago, it has to be said that the level of, let's say, legislation and policing of dam design and etc. was lacking in Brazil. And because Vale were a big part of the government, they were kind of beyond suspicion. So they got away with a lot, and it's all coming back to haunt them now. But it has actually, unfortunately, had a knee-jerk. There's been a real knee-jerk reaction in Brazil with sort of retrospective legislation which has come in, and unfortunately there's a bit of a one-size-fits-all approach to all of this. They don't differentiate between our tiny little tailings ponds and BHP's or Vale's enormous tailings dams, and they don't differentiate between the fact that our little tailings ponds are virtually dry. We're almost depositing tailings which are dry within a week, and you can drive over them with a lorry, because when we actually make our tailings, we're in a sort of a granite ore body, which is it means we don't grind in the mills. We actually have a very coarse grind, which means we actually produce a sand rather than silt type fraction, which means the tailings just settle in no time. They dry, they filter, and that's it. Whereas in the iron ore mines, they are essentially remain in suspension. They're a slurry forever. So they are dealing with a very different problem to us. So their problem is physical failure of these dams because of the weight of all the materials inside them. In our case, if a tailings dam wall fell, it's completely dry stack, so it would go nowhere. There's no risk. And thirdly, we have a detoxification plant, so the material we have in our tailings ponds is completely inert. But unfortunately, tailings dams are tailings dams in Brazil, whether it's tiny one, an egg cup like we've got, or a huge swimming pool like Vale have got. So we've had to do an awful lot of third-party inspections and remediations and putting in quite over-the-top support of our existing tailings pond at Palito, just to comply. And of course, even the consultants and contractors are doing that, saying, well, this is just, frankly, it's ridiculous, but it is what it is. But we decided, probably more from an investment risk, that we were looking. I mean, the problem today is in Brazil, Vale still run many other iron ore mines, and they've got quite a few of their tailings dams are actually on what's called a amber watch, or like a red watch, because they're having to pump billions of dollars into trying to put right their tailings dams, which are operating today, to prevent a third incident. So, and of course, I think one more bit of bad news out of Brazil with tailings, and that's going to make it's just going to make mining dams even more problematic going forward. So when we actually acquired Coringa from from Anfield back in 2017, we decided to, they'd already done a BFS on the project, but we decided we were going to do a PEA, and we were going to take the tailings dam out, and we were going to bring in a filtration plant and dry stack technology. So we wouldn't have a tailings dam, and we thought that would certainly be a huge sort of plus to the local community, that because people don't understand the difference. They see the word tailings dam, and whether it's tiny dam or a big dam, it's just it's just a red flag. So we took it off the menu completely, and I think that's one of the main reasons we got our public hearing so positively received. And on the back of that, we got the preliminary license, which is essentially they are essentially approving the building of the project in principle, because that's when you get stakeholder support, etc. That's where you normally get stopped. After that, your licensing is essentially procedural. You just got to basically just go through the process. You've got past the go/no-go decision at that point. And I think that electing not to have a tailings dam at Coringa was huge. Now, personally, I'd have a tailings dam any day of the week, because they are simpler and probably better than dealing with dry stack. But we're going to have an extra cost of drying our tailings after it's at the back end of the process plant, to make you basically just squeeze the tailings, squeeze the water out, and then you actually have a sand that you can handle, and you just stack it, and that's it, which is more difficult to deal with. But at the end of the day, I think it was a decision we took to circumnavigate any future problems with tailings in Brazil. So we've kind of we've ducked the challenge in many ways. We've just moved away from it. And many companies building projects in Brazil today have done just the same. But then here we are. Another huge advantage of being small. Filtration of tailings is no biggie really. But if you're a big open pit and you've got an enormous volume of material to basically filter, then that's it's almost like a business in itself, just doing that. So it's but that's what we've done. We've taken the tailings dam out. We have a sort of a variation of dry stack tailings at Palito, and we've got a filtration plant we will have a filtration plant at Coringa.
Yeah. Is it, would you say it's more education around the tailings dams issue? Not just, I suppose, educating the public, but also educating maybe some people within the mining industry as well, that are not necessarily associated with tailings.
Totally.
So they can get that point across, that not every tailing dam is one big huge pond. There is differences. So don't paint the what's the saying? Don't paint.
We don't get
tainted by the same brush.
Tainted the same brush. Yeah, exactly. No, absolutely. That is absolutely the point. It should be scaled. And if you're only this big and your material is like this, then you are the lowest risk group. So therefore, your tailings, you don't need to have such ridiculous sort of factors of safety and all this but as I said right at the very beginning, unfortunately, we're stuck with a one size fits all. The authorities in Brazil, the government in Brazil, are so scared of litigation now due to tailings and what's actually happened. They've just gone completely from absolutely slack and incompetent and negligent to ultra conservative, which is you see it all the time. But that's where we are at the moment. So look, it's not going to impact on what we do, but it's just we have to budget now for a lot more on tailings, which we never had to do, and it is frankly not warranted, but it is what it is.
Yeah,
simple.
Yeah. What do you think makes you such an exciting proposition for investors out there? I suppose compared to other junior miners.
Well, I think obviously we're cheap, incredibly cheap. I think we suffer a little bit with liquidity because of our shareholder structure, which is a bit unfortunate. It's something. It was worse. It's got better. We haven't got a lot of free float. We've got two big funds in there, and then two other. Sort of 70-80% of our stock is actually in four hands, which does make we need more retail, which would help. But I think we're about to go into a quite an amazing step change in our time. we are actually today sitting in our best moment. We've got $17 million in the bank. We're robust. We're making money. The gold price is good. The real exchange rate is so much in our favor. We're making money, and we're funding a lot of. And we've got the first part of Coringa completely funded. So we're about to enter this really exciting stage of developing this new mine. And I never want to sort of underplay the exploration success, because I think we've the chance of finding more resource at Palito and Sao Chico, and another element at Palito. I think in the next 18 months, okay, we're saying we're going to go from 40 to 80,000 ounces in the next 2 years, but I think we can actually, with organic growth, very possibly do more. And Coringa itself is, I think, could be a much bigger deposit than what we're actually planning on it being. We've got a process plant there that's got plenty of capacity, and we've got a huge amount of upside at Coringa. So again, I think we could turn Coringa not only into a long-lived asset, but a much bigger one as well. So, and I think once we've actually delivered on Coringa, and we're starting it and it's being built, and people can see the pathway to 80, 90, 100,000 ounces. Hopefully our share price will respond, and we will see. And I think we'll be very ripe for a consolidation. I mean, we're certainly a willing participant in any discussion like that with the right group. And I think a company with a project in Brazil that needs building, and they could sort of combine with us and use our cash flow to help fund debt and etc., get a better debt deal. It'll be a good marriage. So we've always got half an eye on the right type of combination as well. But we're not sellers, desperate sellers or anything like that. We've got a great story going for ourselves. But I think to get mass with the right M&A partner would actually be something we'd like to consider as well.
Yeah. So lastly, as a conclusion, why don't you give us sort of the outlook for the next 18 months, 2 years for Serabi Gold?
Well, obviously, we'll start the mine for the rest of this year. Coringa development of the underground mine will begin, which will be great. So we'll get underground, we'll hit one of the ore bodies, and we'll start developing it. And hopefully there'll be I'll be getting down there doing lots of video and showing, what we're doing. And that's important, because that's we don't expect to do any more equity raising for Coringa. We actually hope with the cash flow we're going to generate from the current operation, we'll actually be able to get. We've got we've borrowed debt off groups like Sprott Asset Lending before, and we've got other banks we've got good relationships with, and they're very keen on sort of what we can do. And one of the things that we do want to do to actually make that debt easier is get underground and actually get into the ore body, so you can really see it in 3 dimensions rather than just in drill holes. So that'll actually help that whole process as well. And we can do some physical bulk sampling and test work as well, which will be great. And obviously at Palito, so that'll be Coringa the first 6 months, and we do hope by the end of the year we'll get this installation license, which will allow us to actually start assembling the process plant at Coringa in 2022, which is the 2 big milestones at Coringa will be the underground mine for the next year, and then hopefully early 2022 the installation license to start the commencement of the plant construction assembly, let's say. So they're the 2 big things at Coringa. At Palito, we're obviously drilling away. We're going to try and drill 30,000 meters this year, a combination of step-out drilling on the existing deposit, plus a series of satellites, which we hope to find new discoveries and actually put new resources. So I'm not quite sure we'll get a new asset called São Domingos, which we actually made some discoveries there already. Whether we can get enough drilling done and enough success there to actually hang a resource on that by the end of the year, right? If we can't, maybe it'll be early part of next year. But that drilling is going to continue in 2022 again. So I think at some point in the middle of next year, let's say, we'll hopefully having new resource updates and reserve updates on at Palito, Sao Chico, and maybe some of 1 or 2 satellites we found as well. So the whole idea of that is to then say at the end of 2022 or the middle of 2022, okay, we found X number of more ounces. We're now going to expand our process plant at Palito, or we're going to put an additional plant somewhere else, so we can get more ounces out of the Palito complex and not just be capped at that 40,000, which we are today. We can actually increase that. So it's a nice split of organic growth and obviously obviously the development of Coringa. And as I say, while all that's going on, we'll have half an eye out open to a sensible sort of combination to scale up the company, which is all great news for shareholders.
Yeah, certainly. Mike, really appreciate your time in give us an overview of Serabi Gold and what you have done in the past and what you're looking to do in the future. If our audience wants to reach out to you, if they've got any questions, how can they go about doing that? Are you across any social media platforms?
We have a Twitter account. Obviously, you can find that. Just go to our website, www.serabigold.com, and you'll find the Twitter account there. And certainly there's, you can contact me by email.
Yeah. Appreciate if audience can, obviously, if you've got any questions for Mike, obviously you can reach out to him on those channels. We can include them in the podcast show notes below. Those that are listening on the YouTube channel, appreciate if you can share this episode out to other people that may want to listen and hear about obviously mining in Brazil, whether it's from an investment perspective or whether just to understand what it's like mining in Brazil. Appreciate if you can share the episode out to those. Thank you for listening, guys. Hope you can share this episode to all your friends and family. And again, Mike, really appreciate your time in showcasing Serabi Gold to our audience. So until next time, happy mining.